because the economy we work in is a knowledge-based economy. It requires leadership which is of interactive collaborators. To collaborate, we need three concurrent styles of leadership working with each other constantly. We need strategic thinkers working alongside high-performing implementers, but these two people don't get on, right? So that's why you need a third category called the relationship guy or the networker who will hold them together, but also say, who else do we need sitting around the table to help us solve complex problems? If you're trying to solve complex problems and if your leadership team does not, as a minimum, have those three characteristics, you're not going to go very far. So, profile of the leaders we need people who are courageous, solve complex problems, 30% failure, not for the faint-hearted. But you can't be momentarily courageous either, right? That's where resilience comes in. And then you need self-control, because when you're out there, people are going to take pot shots at you, and you can't lose it. So that's a character. But you also need self and situation awareness. What's going on? And that's a character and a skill. You have to be a brilliant communicator. And that's a skill. And you also need to have a culture and attitude towards learning, because if you're not constantly learning with a pace scale of change, you can't be relevant after a while, right? So I see too many people saying the same stuff all the time. Stopped learning a long time ago. Then in the public service, particularly really important, is about service above self. And what I mean by that is very evident. People who are able to have a value of service above self is that they are able to put their personal agenda and personal ego subservient to public good. And lastly, they are team play. What I put at the bottom was something that was given to me only 5 years ago by Dr. Murray Horn in my first evaluation as the National Director of the National Health Board. He said to me, Chai, I didn't hire you just to be a great problem solver. Actually, your real job is to deliberately build and leave behind even greater leaders than yourself. I said to him, damn, Murray, I wish someone told me that earlier. So I've tried to combine this thing together and said, so when you look at simple, complicated, or complex, or in the words of Clayton Christensen, in healthcare, predictable healthcare, empirical healthcare, and intuitive healthcare, here's a bit of a guide. Look at the problem, look at the cause, look at the invention, look at the success rate. Which takes me to the New Zealand health strategy. When I did this measure, it's still draft, so about this week's no longer draft, right? So here's the 5 theme. I've got that tattooed on all the heads of my executive team. People powered, closer to home, value and high performance, one team, smart system. I've heard quite a lot in the sector say that's a bit ho-hum, already doing that. When I hear that, I know that they have interpreted each of the 5 themes narrowly. And they've filtered all this thing out to say, yeah, we're already doing that, so what's the big deal? That tells me they have already filtered out and have interpreted it so narrow, they actually don't see the potential. So one of the things, I'm not going to go through this because in the June, I'm going to go through each one of them at a time as part of the opening address. But needless to say, we recognize that the system has to move and change significantly. And the ministry leadership is changing first. We can't ask the system to change if we don't change first. So what we're doing is in December, I announced that I will have 12 direct reports. This is not textbooks, by the way. Textbook says you have fewer. But as you know me, I'm not textbook. 10 of those direct reports are vacancies and are being actively recruited. I will be making the first announcement of the first 5 tomorrow. There are 2 new exciting roles there. One is client insight and analytics. The creation of the role is for the first time in the ministry to have a second-tier position that will remind the rest of us in the first instance, this is the ministry's DOT and me, so what does that mean for consumer? We struggle with client consumer. In the end, I lost, he got client. And how are we using analytics, and not just health analytics, to get an insight on the impact we're making on multiple communities in New Zealand. Not the universal population, but multiple communities, right? So we are just going to get the most exciting guy there. He's coming from the private sector. The next thing is the technology digital services. So this is the most misunderstood role in my ELT. When I asked the guys to recruit the role, the recruiting guys really struggle with this. And the person who will fill the role will not, I'm not looking for someone who is a deep expert in either physical, biological, or digital technology. I'm looking for someone who strategically understands the potential of how those things will converge and how those things can create opportunities for us. The other thing I've asked the ministry's senior staff to do is for real clarity on what is the role of the ministry and what is the expectation we will have on ourselves in the sector. So watch this space. We are going to get on some stuff we're doing now because that's not our role. That's coming to the sector. But the roles that we're going to do, we are real clear about it, and we're going to be letting you know that's our role. To help the ministry to go on that journey, the current ELT, even the acting ones, have to pass an exam, and the two examiners are coming the first week of May. And the first exam is for us to individually and collectively articulate to the two examiners, and one of them is Dame Paula Webster. What is the purpose, the vision, the mission, strategies, target operating model, values, and the culture of the Ministry of Health? My expectation is every single one of us will articulate those things in our own words, but will have the same meaning so that the examiners will know that we as a team actually are joined up. But that's not enough. We actually need a framework for change. And this is the thing that frustrates me most when I listen to the conversation in the sector. When we want to change something, we lurch from one magic bullet to the other. So we're going to develop this stuff a bit more, and this is going to come out in a much more formal way of how we want the sector to think about disruptive change. And I won't go through all that, and I'll talk a bit more about stuff, but this is going to be a framework. We're going to socialize widely in the sector. So if you come and talk to us about this stuff, we'll be actually checking this thing off. So are they talking about models okay? They're not wrong, go back there. And if someone's talking to us about policy, funding, what about models of care, they haven't got that, go back there. If they talked about workforce, IT, facility development, that's the only thing they talked about, wrong answer, go back to the others. We are really interested to have conversation when they come and talk to us about all of these moving parts. Because for disruptive innovation to take hold and for us to transition well, every single one of those things have to move. And hence, it's complex. The thing in the middle also is saying that we often are passionate about innovative ideas, that's only worth 10%. You got the zealots and the passionate leaders, that's only worth 20%. The 30% is about the organizational culture, capability. It's 30%. And that's still not the biggest percent, is understanding the context of the environment. If you fail to understand the 10, 20, 30%, 40% rule, transformation is not going to happen. Quickly, I get asked a lot, what the hell is models of care? In fact, this morning one of my staff asked me. So I say, you know, simply models of care say, it's actually about, when we say the models of care, we're talking about service. We're talking about who does what, where, when, what, how, and why. And it has to be different from what it is today in the context of that framework of change. Right? Then I get asked this a lot, right? What do you mean by a business model? So I say, okay, this is the simple one. I say, look, it's talking about how you connect what is your proposition of value to the customer, and then how you figure out how you're gonna get your key resources, organize your process that actually has a fiscal sustainable formula. Now, I know it's still kind of high level and we have people to work through this sort of stuff, but that's what I mean by business model. So one final thought. this is my coach. I have a coach that just to keep me sane, right? No, meets me every 6 weeks just to check that I'm still okay. And one of the things he said to me one day when I was struggling, I was really struggling with trying to break through something. He said, well, the problem you got stuck, Chai, is because to do new things, you have to be able to tell a different story. To be able to do that, you need to be able to imagine a different reality. And to do that, you need to read, listen, engage with new and different materials, voices, people. So he set me on a course of reading one book, and now I've got a sample of my favorite authors, and many of the things I speak to you about comes from this material. Just to close, and this is coming from one of my favorite authors, so Mike McAfee, he's a terrible presenter, by the way. All my favorite authors, I YouTube them and see whether they give YouTube lectures. It's actually much better when they present well. But this guy's terrible. But his written words are fantastic. So this is his book on the leaders reading, written around the time of the first Obama administration. Leaders are those who are motivated to achieve the common good, who have the qualities required to gain a willing followers in a particular culture at a historic moment when leadership becomes essential to meet the challenges of that time and place. Every single one of those words are marked in blue. I find it really relevant. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Chai. That was fantastic.